Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Top 5 series for Ryerson's alumni and friends. My name is Christian Mehta, and I am the AVP of Engagement at the university. I'm delighted to be your moderator for this session. Before we begin, I want to pay respects to the Indigenous peoples and elders and ancestors who stewarded and cared for the nature and people who lived on the land where Ryerson is located today. At the university, we have made a deep and long-lasting commitment to truth and reconciliation, and I invite you to learn more about this work online and in person next time we can get together on campus. I know you've got a lot on the go, so this is a 30-minute webinar. We'll dive in quickly, but before I introduce our presenter, Arlene Throness, I have just a few housekeeping tips to share. In about 20 minutes, Arlene will be taking your questions. If you want to ask something, please send your question to Jennifer Hicks using the chat function so she can moderate the flow. Your cameras and mics are off, so sending your question to Jennifer is the best way to go. Second, if you're on social media, please use the hashtag #RUTop5. And finally, we are recording this session, so if you want to rewatch or share it with your networks, please look for a message from us in your inbox in the next day or so. So now I want to introduce today's expert. Arlene Throness is Ryerson's urban farm manager. Her love of food has led her to work on farms, greenhouses, and in kitchens across Canada. She studied food security at Ryerson, holds a Bachelor of Arts from Concordia University, and a certificate in permaculture design from the Linnea Farm Ecological Garden Society on Cortes Island, British Columbia. Arlene was the coordinator of Concordia's rooftop greenhouse and a founder of its City Farm School. She received the Toronto Botanical Gardens 2015 Astor Award, given to individuals who embody the mission to transform our city by connecting people to plants and the natural world. As an avid enthusiast of urban permaculture, Arlene is always looking to share and trades ideas for innovative ways to bring local resources into the food cycle. What a pleasure it is to have you here today with us, Arlene. It's over to you for the next 20.
Great. Thanks, Christian. Hey, everyone. Thank you for coming. So as Christian said, I manage a 1/4-acre green roof at Ryerson University, where we produce food for the campus community, conduct research, and host workshops and events. And today I'm going to give you 5 tips on growing food at home. At the urban farm at Ryerson, we practice spray-free ecological farming. And as you heard in my bio, my background and training is in permaculture, which is a design framework for ecological farming. So I'm going to share today's tips through 5 principles of ecological garden design, inspired by one of my favorite gardening books, a home scale, let's see here. I'm sharing my screen. Is it working? Yeah, a home scale guide to permaculture. So I'm going to share my screen throughout the session just to give you some resources as we go along. So So just a bit of background on ecological farming. This approach to food production is gaining momentum, not just with small scale growers like us, but also on a large scale commercial scale as well. Recent studies have shown that increasing the living components in soil has a bigger impact on yield and plant productivity than the conventional method of tilling and using synthetic fertilizers. As you can imagine, tilling and turning the soil disrupts the life and the structure. And when you add pesticides, herbicides, and fungicides, it further decimates the soil life. Soil is not just a substrate. There's a lot more going on at the microbiological level in the soil than we previously thought. For example, The fungal network of mycorrhiza found in the forest floor is being called the wood wide web, because trees actually communicate and share resources with each other through the mycorrhiza. This fungus lives on the roots of plants, which is called the rhizosphere, and it exchanges nutrients for sugars. So for example, a forest will build an immunity to a pest or disease at one end of the forest, like on the opposite end where it started. So one example is, as a giraffe goes along and eats leaves, the leaves up ahead will become bitter, because the plants know the giraffe is coming through the wood wide web. The giraffe even knows this, so it will go 10 feet ahead to get in front of the bitter leaves. So, so the world of nature is way ahead of us on this, and we're just starting to figure this out. So there's actually 1,000 to 2,000 times more life in the soil where roots are present than where roots are not present. And we can see this pattern when we look at nature. In healthy, abundant systems, the soil is a rich brown humus full of life and covered with a blanket of litter layer with sticks and dried leaves and filled with vegetative biomass, whereas disturbed soils are pale and cracked and dry and lifeless. So, and what's missing in those systems is the organic matter, which hosts the life, feeds the life, absorbs water, retains nutrients. So ecological farming is also called regenerative agriculture because it has more potential to sequester carbon than any other climate change solution. For this reason, experts are saying that we need to de-intensify our agricultural systems and consider the ecosystem services that farms produce beyond food. So for example, in urban environments that are largely made of concrete, green roofs and gardens act like a sponge, catching water and cooling the city, and they create habitat for wildlife and biodiversity. And they're spaces for us to connect with nature and each other. So in addition to producing food, gardens make our city more livable. And for all these reasons, green roof technology is being used in cities all over the world. And these functions are so important to our well-being that in Toronto, we have a bylaw that all new buildings must include a green roof. So this is your bonus tip. The City of Toronto also has an eco-incentive program. So essentially they will give you a grant to turn your roof into a green roof. So that's a good resource to have as well. And a quick shout out to Ryerson's Professor Hitesh Doshi, who wrote the bylaw in 2009, making Toronto the first city in North America to pass this legislation. So at this stage, not many green roofs are being used for food production, and not all urban farms are committed to growing ecologically. But I'm excited about the intersection of green infrastructure and urban agriculture and the potential it has to transform our built environment into thriving and productive ecosystems. And I'm happy that you are too. So thanks for being here. So the first principle I'm going to share is observation. So before you begin your garden, it's good to take some time to design and strategize. So the first step is identify your goals. What's motivating you to grow food? Motivation is key. You need to think about what plants you like to eat and what you'll enjoy growing. And these goals will help determine what you're going to grow. So are you growing for subsistence, to share food? Is it for access to healthier, fresher food, something you can't find in the grocery store? Is it to be active and be outdoors? Next, identify your site's opportunities and constraints. Look at where the sun rises and sets. Figure out which direction is south, because it's not actually in line with the street orientation. And then consider how people move through your space, where they spend time, what's already growing there. If you have a tree in your yard, it will create shade, but it will also compete for nutrients with your plants in the ground. So you have to think about, as far as the branches go, that's as far as the roots go underground as well. If you're growing in a container, choose a sunny spot. Sun is pretty key for all plants. Some plants will tolerate shade, but they all love sun. And try to utilize any unique features in your space, like thermal energy that you might get off of a south-facing brick wall, for example. So observation is the first principle, but it's something that you want to do throughout every aspect of approaching, designing and strategizing and getting your garden started. The second principle is to make the least change for the greatest effect. So identify the leverage point and intervene there. So you want to practice incrementalism. Start small and build on your successes. Plant some things now, observe what worked and what didn't, and then plant more in the summer, plant more in the fall, expand your garden next year. You don't have to do everything right away. It doesn't all have to be from scratch. So you can buy your seedlings, you can buy compost, vermicompost. Some great resources in Toronto. Urban Harvest is a fantastic spot in Toronto to get seeds and seedlings. You can also find great products at hydroponics stores. The one near me is Grow It All on Geary Street. They have potting mixes, worm castings, liquid seaweed, kelp, grow lights. They have trays for seedlings and microgreens. They also have all the components that you need to build a self-watering container. Self-watering containers are or sub-irrigated containers. They have water in the bottom and then soil on the top. And the plants, there's a wick that the plants that is sitting in the water reservoir below, and then it wicks the water up into the soil, and then there's a pipe up top that you use to water the plant. So generally you just plant one plant in there, like a tomato plant or a kale plant, or if you're doing something smaller like salad or radishes, you can plant several plants. If you're doing it in like a bucket, like one of these buckets. And so you can get all the stuff you need at Grow It All to build one of those, or you can just look around your house and see what you've got. You don't have to use that exact method either. Like you can build a sub-irrigated container with all kinds of things, and there's lots of information online on how to do that. If you need a large supply of compost, you can order or pick up from Homeland, which is where we get our compost at the urban farm. They're also in Toronto. It's a family-run company, Tony and Joe, and they're father and son. They're lovely people, and they sell compost made from aged manure that's collected around the Lake Simcoe area. And it's not sterilized, which means that it will be full of life, which is really good, but it might also have weed seeds. So just be aware of that. Less Mess is a company that will deliver a cubic yard of compost in a bag, but it is sterilized, which means that you will want to add some of your own worm castings that you either make at home with a worm bin, which you can also look up online, or you can buy worm castings, as I mentioned, at a hydroponic store, and then you inoculate your soil with that, which is full of life and organisms, because worms live in symbiosis with microbes. And Fiesta Farms also has like Fiesta Gardens, and then you may find stuff at your local garden center, but they often have stuff that's more for low maintenance plants. So it is nice to go just one step beyond. So when you're selecting your seeds, remember that each plant has its own unique needs. So do your research and select plants that will grow well in your space. There's lots of information online and in books. One of my favorite resources is Johnny's Seeds, which is a a company that we buy seeds from. And we don't get all our seeds from there because we do buy from local companies as well. But they have they have a lot of information on their website. So I'm going to show you how it works. So I'm going to look at kale. Everybody loves kale, right? It's a leafy green. It's in the brassica family, and it's very nutritious. And it's a cold hardy crop. So you can plant it early in the spring and into the fall, and it might even overwinter, which will draw the sugars out. The frost will draw the sugars out and make it taste sweeter. So I'm going to click on this one, which, as it says up here, frost tolerant. Wow. And over here on the left, it tells you what temperature it will germinate at. So in the spring, when you're looking at the weather, it says here it germinates between 10 and 15 degrees Celsius. So you're going to want to wait till you get a few days of that. In the growing information here, this is my favorite part. It'll tell you how many days it takes to germinate, and how much, what spacing to plant it at and how to sow it. It'll tell you a little bit about pests and disease, the days to maturity, which are up here as well, but it tells you down here if it's from direct seeding or from transplant. Tips on harvest. So when I'm out in the field, I use my phone and I just Google Johnny Seeds with my voice application because my hands are usually muddy. And this gives me lots of information about spacing. And in the winter during crop planting, I use the Growers Library. So here you have planning tools and calculators. So I like to use the seed starting calculator. So in Toronto, people say that the last date you can expect a frost in the spring is somewhere between May 10th and May 20th. So I'm going to click on the 15th. And here it'll tell you when each of these plants likes to be planted. So the number of weeks to start before setting out. So that's starting it indoors. And the asterisk tells you which plants that Johnny's recommends to direct seed. So don't start it indoors, just sow it right into the soil. And then when to set it out relative to the frost-free date, et cetera, et cetera. And just, I'll give you one more little tip here. So they've got growing comparison charts too. So you can click on an herb comparison chart, for example, and it'll tell you what light and spacing and hardiness, days to maturity, that kind of stuff. So that's one resource that I use a lot. So another consideration is to prioritize plants that make sense in a small space. So something with a continual harvest like tomatoes, cucumbers, squash that will yield daily. But keep in mind, these high producers are also heavy feeders. So they need a lot of space, nutrients, and sun. Plants that have short days to maturity and can be succession planted. So anything in the brassica family will mature in 4 to 6 weeks and can be sown quite densely or biointensively, meaning that when they mature, their leaves will almost touch. So this includes radishes, which mature in 3 to 4 weeks, and they can be sown as close as 1-inch spacing, or baby pak choi, which matures in 5 weeks and can be sown at 4-inch spacing. Cut and come again is also really helpful, which refers to mostly leafy greens and herbs, where you can cut them just above where the new growth starts, or you can just harvest the outer leaves and then the plant will regrow for a second harvest. So those are all things to consider. So I'm going to have to rush through the next few, but the third principle is to incorporate local and renewable resources that reproduce and build over time, and to catch and store energy. So look in your recycling bin. What food grade items do you have that you can use to make seedling trays or a mini greenhouse, egg cartons, yogurt containers, coffee cups? Avoid chemical products that will disrupt the soil food web, as we talked about at the beginning. So how do you build life in the soil? Use no-till techniques, minimize disturbing the soil, never apply chemicals, even products that are considered organic, like soapy water or diatomaceous earth. These will also kill the good bugs too. So in this respect, ecological farming actually goes beyond organic. it's not just about producing spray-free food, but about contributing to the health and well-being of the farm as a part of the surrounding ecosystem. So we manage pests and disease naturally, and this is something that Elliot Coleman calls pest positive strategies. So that means rather than pest negative, we use plant positive strategies. So giving plants the space they need, the light. When things go wrong, I generally ask myself, what did I do? Did I plant this too early in the spring? Pests that are weak will be more susceptible to pests and disease. And Masanobu Fukuoka talks about in his book, The One Straw Revolution, about do nothing farming and mimicking nature. So that's kind of what we do. We focus on giving plants what they need, ignore the pests and disease. I know that sounds a bit weird, but generally they manage it. Generally, when things go wrong, it's something I did. It's not actually the pests and disease. So with that said, plant a little extra for critters because they will inevitably get in, but this won't bother you if you have extra. Plant some flowers to attract beneficial insects. For weeds, you can chop and drop, which means cut them before they seed and use them as mulch, because that will suppress more weeds from coming. You can also put down cardboard. You can buy straw on Kijiji or at Spielman's Garden Center on Wilson Road. And you can also use leaves as mulch. Dechlorinate your water if you can. So let it sit for 24 to 48 hours before you water. Plants will prefer that. And then you can also use row cover. That's what we use on the farm to prevent pests, which you can buy online at William Dam Garden Center.
Arlene, we have about 2 more minutes before we have to get to questions.
Okay, perfect. I'm almost done.
Okay.
So the next principle is to set you at ease. It's get a yield. That's a permaculture principle, get a yield. So don't forget about the harvest. If all of this is overwhelming, just do what's easiest for you and do what it takes to get some food. So if you have to break some rules, you have to. And don't forget that that's what all the work you're doing this for is, to get a harvest. And also don't forget how much work the harvest is, because we often think of planting as preparing the soil and weeding and planting, but actually you have to harvest every day. And if you're going to can tomatoes, honestly, it can take a day to harvest, and then it can take the whole night to can them. So be prepared for that. And the final principle is actually the first, it's the same as the first one, it's observation. So when you're in the garden, ask the plants what they need. This basically means spend time in your garden, sit, observe. You will see the plants will tell you what they need. A plant will say, I'm thirsty. You'll just know, it'll look dry. And another plant will say, I'm too close to the plant beside me. Why did you plant me so close? Or it'll say like, I'm nutrient deficient, and because it'll look yellow. And so you'll just start to figure out like that the plants are actually communicating with you, which is really exciting. And so the last resource I'm gonna share here is this book, Braiding Sweetgrass, Indigenous Wisdom, Scientific Knowledge, and the Teaching of Plants by Robin Wall Kimmerer, which is all about observing nature, using nature as our teacher, and developing and celebrating our ecological consciousness. So that's it. That's all wow. I have to say. I have nothing else to say.
Yeah, right. That was amazing, Arlene. The chat's going wild, so we're just going to dive in. Are you ready?
Okay.
Okay, some of these are, I think, quick ones, but some of them are a bit longer. So the first one is a question from Amiga. Arlene, tell us a little bit about the growing zone number system and the one that we're in Toronto.
So zones refer to what the hardiness of plants that will grow in your zone. So Toronto is said to be 5 or 6. So like when you can also use the Farmer's Almanac as well as Johnny's Seeds to find some information about zones and whether or not plants will overwinter or will grow at all in our growing season. The other thing to remember is that we're not just dealing with cold in the spring and the fall and frost and cold winters. We're also, the way that our daylight works has an effect on plants. So in the winter, our days are short. In the summer, they're long. So we also want to choose cultivars that will do well with long, warm, hot days in the summer. So that's something to think about too.
Okay, here's one, something I think I'm dealing with too, from Andrea. What is your suggestion to dealing with raccoons that dig soil for grubs?
That's a really good question. In the country, people build fences around their gardens. So I think that that's the most effective way. Otherwise, I would say, yeah, just plant extra, because there is urban wildlife in Toronto. It's a pretty big challenge. It's also on the roof. We don't have raccoons or squirrels, which is possibly one of the best things about rooftop farming compared to ground gardening.
Yeah, absolutely. Here's a question from Bill. What are good things to put in my composter at home or in the garden? Do I need to add worms?
Well, worms should find their way in there. If you want to, you can add some red wrigglers, because they're the worms that live in compost. Or you can add some worm castings that you can get from a friend or on Kijiji or from the hydroponics store, and then there'll be eggs in there and they'll hatch. But compost, you want to, like, the general rule is half green, half brown, and the critical mass is 1 meter by meter. So that will trigger hot composting. And so all the greens, like, are a lot of kitchen scraps and stuff like that. You want to make sure you're matching those with browns. You might have to actually store some leaves or shred newspaper or buy straw to make sure you have the right ratio. So Lori is giving us a tip. You can use beneficial nematodes to deal with the grubs, and that way the raccoons won't have to lure them to get there. So thanks, Lori.
Nice, thanks. Okay, so here's another question. This one is from, where did it go? It's from Sarah. Do you recommend an eco-friendly fertilizer for container gardens? She's heard about hen manure.
Yeah, hen manure is great. You can get chicken pellets, which are really easy to apply, or feather meal. You can also get liquid seaweed at the hydroponic store. You can order it from William Dam, or fish emulsion. We use liquid kelp throughout the growing season. It's fantastic. And you can also make your own compost tea if you have your own worm castings. But that's a 2.0. You're probably already an expert gardener if you're doing that.
Well, listen, you also have apiaries, right, at the farm?
We do.
So tell us about honey. Are we going to get some honey this year? Are you going to be selling it?
Yeah, we've opened our hives on the roof. We're not doing a full growing season because Ryerson's pandemic plan is to limit access to the campus. So we've created an operational model that's minimal because agriculture is exempt, so we can access the roof, but in order to limit access to the roof, we're just going to manage the bees and a few forage crops. The bees look great, and the honey will be sweet.
Yay! Yeah, it was great last year, so I'm looking forward to that. This one is from a great friend of ours, an alum, Rodney Yip, who is also a great fan of yours and a wonderful supporter of the urban farm and is involved in the circular economy with the City of Toronto. Hi, Rodney, if you're watching, it's nice to see you.
Hi, Rodney.
Here's a question. How can alumni get involved with the farm? Are there volunteer opportunities, and is there stuff the farm needs?
Yes. So as I said, this year we've just got the farm under cover crops like clover and rye, winter squash, and buckwheat, which the bees will enjoy. But if we do reopen this year, otherwise next year, we will be doing volunteering 3 times a week. So please get in touch. We would love to have you. You can also buy food at the farmer's market or become a Harvest Share member. And we're doing field walks and workshops and training programs. So please get in touch.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Arlene, listen, we're out of time, but I want to thank you so much for being here and sharing your expertise, for all that you're doing at Ryerson and beyond. You're an incredible leader, and I'm so happy that you were able to join us today.
Well, thanks everyone for coming. It means a lot to me that you all showed up, and it's great to connect.
Absolutely. Listen, before we conclude this webinar, I want to take a moment to thank Valerie Pringle, who's an alum of Ryerson's program, her husband, Andrew, for their generous donation in 2004, which funded the installation of a green roof atop the George Vary Engineering Computing Center. This is where the first Ryerson urban farm was located. This green roof was built to help manage temperature and reduce rainwater runoff of the building, but also provided fertile ground for an innovative idea. In 2013, with the support of Vula Kokolakis and University's Business Services, the space was transformed into an ecological vegetable farm and living lab. And the Pringles have once again invested in research that will help others replicate what Arlene and her team have done on the roof. We are thankful for each and every person who has made a kind and generous donation to support this work. And if you're interested in supporting the farm operations, we'll provide you with a link on our online giving page, and along with the video of this webinar. We'll send that to you by email in the next day or so. So please do check your inbox for more info. Arlene, thank you again for being here. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. We hope you enjoyed this. It was informative. I learned a lot for my allotment garden, which I'm going to be working at this week or next week. And I hope you all have a great, great afternoon. Bye for now.